It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Locked On Lakers podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin. I'm joined by Pete Zayas now for the second time because the new microphone that I was just about to brag about just cut out. So
yeah, you're like, oh yeah, it's great. It's
we're going. Everything is going great. We have a ton to get to from over the weekend. We have the NBA's new policy regarding resting on nationally televised games. Clippers take another L. You know, you hate to see it. Really, you do. We have the debate that Pete and I were having from before the weekend regarding Kyrie Irving and media availability and his choice not to do it, or the report. The message that he sent out there didn't say that he wasn't going to do it. It was Brian Windhorst who later came out and reported that he was not going to participate in any media availability this year. So Pete and I talked about it on Twitter. Now we want to expand on our thoughts here. And I actually think the two topics are actually kind of connected. So that'll be segments 1 and 2. And then finally, we haven't talked about the Quinn Cook thing, which for some reason has been polarizing.
Hey, we always got to have something to, we're Laker fans. You got to have something to be mad
the
about.
offseason was going too well. We haven't yelled at each other yet. And then Quinn Cook, poor Quinn Cook too, by the way, who everybody was sad to see go. And then they announced him back. And the people who were sad to see him go were like, no,
what are we doing? It's like that guest. You're like, oh, I'm so sorry to see you leave. And then they came back, right? Their flight got canceled or something.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm happy. I'm happy to have him back, but I get the other side of the equation.
Yeah, so we're gonna discuss the two sides of that discussion. The place that I wanted to start, though, like I said, was with this NBA policy regarding teams. I want to make sure I get the language here right. Now, this is reporting, so it might not even be the league's official language, but it was something along the lines. I know Chris Haynes was a person with the report. And he said that basically, as I scroll through it and try to find it, I promise I'm going to find it. I guess I'm not going to find it. He said that basically the NBA doesn't want stars sitting for nationally televised games, that if a player takes a rest day on one of those games, the NBA could fine that organization upwards of $100,000, which sounds steep. And with things how they are in Houston right now between James Harden and the Rockets, I would love to see the day that James Harden also costs Tillman Fertitta $100,000 because he doesn't feel like playing in a nationally televised game. But let's just start with your reaction to the policy itself, because I'm interested in this one.
There's the financial pressure, right, of reduced revenue due to lack of fans, and just this extends into last season as well, where I mostly agree with it, right? The idea that we are kind of all in this together and need to, on the games where there need to be, on the games that generate revenue, the most revenue, that's when we need to put our best foot forward. My only thing is that if that's the idea, then do it all throughout. Like, there's more parts of how the game is presented nationally that impact revenue than just whether or not a star player plays. And I think that focus has been there for so long. It goes into the media and the coverage of it that you and I have talked about many times. So I get it. I get the necessity to want the nationally televised games to be the best version of themselves. I just hope that they look beyond just whether or not a star player sits.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know that they would make an announcement about that, right? Like, that's the kind of thing that would leak from behind the scenes that, hey, ESPN, the NBA, Adam Silver sat down ESPN, sat down Turner and said, you guys got to present us in a better way. And by better, by the way, I don't even mean more, well, I guess it is more positively, but like actually focus on the game is where I would start. But
right
with this policy, I found the actual tweet. So again, Chris Haynes of Yahoo says, Yahoo sources, NBA implementing new resting policy for the 2020-2021 season with teams prohibited from resting healthy players for any high-profile, nationally televised game, and violation could result in a fine of at least $100,000. At least, by the way. Like
it's a big number.
That's Tillman Fertitta's like, why did I do this? Why did I? This was a terrible. Milk was a bad decision, but the policy itself wouldn't exist in a healthier league, right? Like in a healthier season, where going into it, the NBA has more positive momentum than it has right now. It doesn't say anything about this being the policy moving forward. It doesn't say anything about like this being something that the league wants moving forward. Now we'll see if that information comes out after the fact. But I think that has everything to do with the fact that the NBA lost so much money by way of cutting its season short last year. They spent so much money on the bubble, and now they took a profit on the bubble and wound up getting some of that revenue back. But still, it was not your typical year. And then on top of all of that, like the thing that people forget is the NBA spent a chunk of its season not getting the normal revenue it usually got from China, which we don't even know what that looks like. But the estimations have been pretty damn high on that front too. So with all of that being context here, that is exactly why I think this is taking place. And I don't think actually it's going to stick around. Depending on how well the season goes, I wouldn't foresee this being the policy moving forward. Because this is something that you bargain for in a CBA, and you'd have to give something up to the players to make this a permanent change.
I think things are in such flux that it's possible that it could be the policy moving forward. I think the monetization of the league, as people go more and more onto their phones and on social media than watching TV and pregame shows and postgame shows and all that, like people's viewing consumption habits are changing more and more from the TV to their phone. And the figuring out how do we make money off of that is going to be something that's a continual effort and a continual challenge, to the point where I don't think that revenue issues that the league has are necessarily just confined to the pandemic, right? And once the pandemic is over, things go back to normal. I don't think there is. I think like what normal is on a lot of fronts in the NBA and really in the world is going to be being rebuilt in a lot of ways, and we're not going to go back to the way that things used to be. So I'm curious to see what sticks around policy-wise and what is just a function of that era, but I wouldn't be surprised if this stuck around longer than that.
Yeah, it's weird. I would love to get, some honest takes, because some of this stuff you can't really say publicly. There's competitors involved. So like if ESPN comes out and says that people aren't watching their pregame show, and then TNT was like, we don't know what your problem is,
right?
They aren't going to come out and say that. But I would like to know what the numbers look like in regards to people who actually take their analysis from the TV at this point, because you can get so much via Twitter. And now Twitter is a drop in the water compared to the fan bases from all of these teams. But you do have Facebook. You do have people who and honestly too, I wonder how many people are just like coming up with their own analysis and don't like necessarily need to hear Charles Barkley yell at them about why the postman going away in this era is this terrible, terrible thing. I kind of wonder if there's just a fatigue factor there as well, beyond the amount of analysis they can get from people like you and me. And I think, yeah, you're right. I think all of this kind of comes together. And now the way that it seems ESPN in particular has gone about making up for that loss of revenue is by rumor mongering and drama mongering and doing all of that stuff. And even there, though, I'm not sure how profitable that really is. As somebody,
it's short term. It's short term thinking, in my opinion.
It is. And as somebody who came up doing that, right? Like I'm SEO trained. I did it for years, literal years, doing, writing pieces about trades that the Lakers could potentially make and free agents who make sense. And oh my God, Woj just said kind of, sort of, maybe that LeBron James might be coming to the Lakers, like stuff like that. I've made money off of it, but
sure. And that generates clicks. Yeah.
But I think like that kind of revenue generation is more specific to those websites than it is to an entity like ESPN. Like ESPN, I would probably say is better off focusing on more sustainable means of revenue generation than all of these rumors. And look, there are much smarter people than me, trying to figure all of this out and spending a lot more time thinking about it than I am. But I can say that one of the reasons for your success and my success, especially our success in the show doing as well as it has, is that we stay away from a lot of that stuff. We'll joke about it and we'll mention it in passing or whatever, but we've spent a lot more time talking about ways that the Lakers match up with their playoff opponent, or how Montrezl Harrell is going to fit offensively and defensively now that he's actually on the roster. And I think there's a lot more, the hunger for that is a lot more repeatable than hoping that this headline grabs your attention.
Yeah, I think that engagement metrics are something that they're kind of the analytics of the media ecosystem,
Defensive
right?
analytics.
Yeah, right. And that they have a lot of value, of course, right? Likes and retweets and clicks and followers and all of these things that rightly have some degree of validity, but I think that gets taken too far. And I think that the level of passion and engagement and loyalty that followers have are more important, because that means that those are your repeat customers, right? It's not the person that clicks on this rumor on where superstar X is going next year. That will get you a click for that. But the real way of building, in my opinion, is to get that person to not be able to wait for the next thing that you come out with, right? Whether that's an individual content creator or on a broader perspective, the league in general, right? Like, people should be like, LeBron versus Luka on Christmas. Hell yes, sign me up for that.
Yep.
And the promotion of that, it comes from a genuine interest in the game. That, like, to me, basketball is a drug, and you and I are drug dealers, right? Like, the more you learn about ball, I just gave Harrison something to clip. That upsets me, but give him a little sentence of mine, like, you and I are drug dealers. Yeah, you're welcome, Harrison. But the more you know about basketball, and the more that it's such a complex game, that the more you understand about it, the more you're like, oh shit, that's really cool. And now there's some sort of, like, I'm thinking about it in my free time. I'm really looking forward to the next game. I'm watching the next game a little bit closer. It's a matter of increasing the investment in your existing fan base more than it is getting clicks and ratings and things like that. It's like, how passionate do you make? Because that also leads people who are more casual into being more invested in it.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden they're not as casual as they used to.
Their friend is super invested in. They want to say, well, that seems like fun.
Right. And then their friend can explain something. Hey, watch this on this play type thing. Right. And it builds on itself. Right. It's kind of getting more hooked on the drug, to keep the analogy. Right. And so I think that that's a more sustainable way toward building that. It's easy to think, oh, this rumor is going to get a lot of clicks on this article, but there's no investment in the person who created it. You're not looking to go back to them for anything substantive except for the next rumor. And there's only so many rumors. There's only so many guys who get traded, only so many guys who switch teams, that
some of it, like, so much of it is echo. Like, it's the same story, like, over and over and over. Now, like, some have new wrinkles, like James Harden choosing to go to Vegas and party instead of make his way to training camp. Like, those are new and interesting wrinkles or whatever. But yeah, I find myself growing really bored of it. By the time I left Silver Screen and Roll, I was so burnt out that I really don't feel like writing about whether or not Giannis might come 3 years from now. I'm really okay not writing that article. And I think, the further we get away from it, and the further that we pull listeners from it, the more they realize, yeah, you know what? I could live without it too. I could find that out
It's not
later.
that fun. It's really not that fun. And the who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan? Like, is anyone really having fun with this stuff?
No,
Like,
not
no.
when we're doing comparison shopping. That's for damn sure. The thing I can't wait for though is next time, the first time Avery asks me what I do, what's your job, Daddy? Or when I go to her school or something like that, I'm a drug dealer, and I'm looking forward to that. Let's take a second here because I do think some parts of this first conversation play a role in the resting in particular, and the league's reliance on superstars is something that I think plays a role in this whole Kyrie Irving discussion. But we'll see where this one goes. There might be some fireworks in this one. I can't lie. Pete and I are on two ends of the spectrum on this one. And I'm looking forward to see where this goes. So yeah, strap yourselves down, maybe turn your volume down a little bit. Capitalist Pete versus Comrade Pete, or Capitalist Anthony against Comrade Pete here in a couple of minutes. Today's show is brought to you in part by Headspace. Life can be stressful even under normal circumstances. 2020 has been anything but normal. You need stress relief that goes beyond quick fixes. That's Headspace. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. Headspace is one of the only meditation apps advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. So, whatever the situation, Headspace really can help you feel better. Overwhelmed? Headspace's 3-minute SOS meditation for you. Need some help falling asleep? Headspace's wind down sessions members swear by. And for parents, Headspace even has morning meditations you can do with your kids. Headspace's approach to mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost focus, and increase your overall sense of well-being. Personally, I am a new father. I wake up in the morning sometimes dreading the idea of juggling work and trying to squeeze shows in during Avery's nap times. And just being able to relax and collect myself before every day has been incredible. Headspace is backed by 25 published studies on its benefits, 600,000 5-star reviews, and over 60 million downloads. Headspace makes it easy for you to build a life-changing meditation practice with mindfulness that works for you on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. You deserve to feel happier, and Headspace is a meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/lockedonnba. That's headspace.com/lockedonnba for a 1-month free trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. This is the best deal offered right now. Head over to headspace.com/lockedonnba today.
We live in a world of fees. Airlines, hotels, food delivery, and especially car dealers all charge excessive last-minute fees. When you want something badly enough, it feels like your only choice is to pay up. But what if you had a choice to take a stand instead? At Carvana, we believe in treating you better. With zero hidden fees, you can drive off without feeling ripped off. That's what it means to live feelessly with Carvana.
So just for background on this, again, Kyrie Irving releases in a statement basically saying that, in 2020, we have to do things differently, or heading into 2021 or heading into this new era, we have to do things differently in regards to all kinds of things. And he's sick of getting his message screwed up or misconstrued. He's sick of that, and is now going to approach things differently so as to avoid that moving forward. And as a result, Brian Windhorst, I believe on The Jump, reported that what this means is Kyrie Irving isn't going to talk to media this year, that he's going to black himself out from that part of his job responsibilities. And for me personally, coming from where I come from and in my own background, I'm not even a media guy. I've been in maybe 5 scrums in my entire lifetime. All of them were just shitty experiences. So I can understand where it's coming from. But from a PR perspective, I think not talking directly or not having a relationship with the people who are responsible with your story and telling your story, seems like a pretty poor way to go about not having your message misconstrued, because when you're talking to somebody, you can just explain your message. And that's where I'm coming from on this one. Pete, you approach it from a different standpoint, though, more empathetic towards the players.
Yeah, I think a lot of this too has to do with Kyrie being the particular person who's doing this, and I think that there's
Mhm.
I don't know the specifics of, I mean, in some ways I do, but for the most part, I don't know Kyrie's grievances and the specifics of when he's felt like his words have been misconstrued. I don't think his strategy is particularly effective. You and I actually agree on the notion that doing this is not going to accomplish what I think he wants to accomplish.
Mhm.
My point is that I understand the underlying sentiment, whether it's from Kyrie or any other player, that those types of environments can lead to their words being twisted. It can lead to,
Mhm.
it seems like my impression of scrums, for one, I don't think I believe in the intended purpose of media. There's a reason it's like the one job that's protected in our Bill of Rights, and it's in the First Amendment, right? The holding power to account and
Mhm.
is something that's extraordinarily important. We can go off on a whole other branch that I don't want to get off on, where I think that in practicality that doesn't exactly happen. But from a player's perspective, my impression is that players mostly try to get out of those situations without saying anything stupid, right? Or saying anything that can get
Yeah.
misconstrued or taken out of context. And that there is a portion of the media that is gunning for a headline, that is trying to get those people to say something that can generate one of those articles that we were talking about in the
Mhm.
first segment. Might not be a rumor article, but it can be that, like, oh, this guy said this, right?
Or even worse, it's not trying to generate an article, it's trying to generate a headline, which
Right,
is something very different. An article
for
is where
sure.
you expand on it, right? Like that's one of the things that I think people like Silver Screen and Roll for, is that
Yeah,
we wouldn't just write the rumor, we would try to offer context, we would
and
try
some
to
thoughts
explain
on
what
it.
was going on, and the headlines, Harrison and I and Drew back when he was working there, we tried to make the headlines SEO friendly, search engine friendly, but also not so inflammatory as to get somebody to say, well, fake news this and fake news that, like that. But we aren't, one would argue that we were probably in the minority on that front, you know.
Right. Well, I mean, from a financial standpoint, media outlets are motivated to get
Yeah.
engagement. That's how they sell advertising. It's how they make money. And as long as we have for-profit media, that's always going to be a motivating factor. And so it's this, I can totally see why in an era where when players, if it's important to a player, and I think most players will just continue doing what they've done,
Mhm.
but I can absolutely empathize with the player, man. I don't really want to participate in this. Like, this doesn't benefit me. And the pushback on that is that yes, it does. It's part of the league, right? Is the communication with the media. I I think that we're in the middle of a great change, right? In not just
Mhm.
the NBA, but just in the world, like I was saying in that first segment. And I think that part of that change is going to be reviewing things that we've always taken as this is just how we do it. And I think reevaluating some of the components of that. And so, from a player's perspective, I can absolutely see why a player would not really want to participate in that environment, because not a lot of good comes out of it for them, and bad certainly can.
I don't know that I agree that not a lot of good comes out of it. Like I
Yeah,
don't
talk to
know
me about
that.
that. What is the good that comes out for them?
Well, the good is that you do get a message out there, that you do formulate these relationships with people. Like
But it's through a filter, right?
If LeBron James just walked out onto the court, played basketball, walked back into the locker room, and never communicated with anybody, we wouldn't know anything about the guy, right? It's Kawhi Leonard. It's like Kawhi Leonard is very Kawhi and LeBron are on the two ends of the spectrum,
Mhm.
where I think it's a lot easier to invest yourself personally in LeBron James because we know a lot about the human, the person. Whereas like with Kawhi, now that does make him a target. You know, that's the negative aspect of it, is that his own political feelings, his societal feelings, his personal standing amongst friends and inside the league. That does make him a target. But I think a lot more people find themselves interested in LeBron James on a more personal level than somebody like Kawhi Leonard, who literally drives from San Diego, takes a 2-hour drive, plays it at the Clippers facility or plays at Staples Center, and then drives back home. And we almost never hear from the guy. And I think, you can look at the relationship that both of those players have with fan bases. Like the complaint that the reason Kawhi came to the Clippers in the first place or came to LA in the first place was because he and his camp felt like he wasn't optimizing that aspect of earning potential, right? He doesn't have LeBron James's $1 billion lifetime shoe guarantee or shoe deal with Nike. He only has a couple of commercials here and there. And now, like, part of it is the literal willingness to do some of that stuff. LeBron is a lot more willing to put himself out there to do that. But like, that's the whole point. And by the way, like Kawhi not participating in media, it's not like that stops those negative stories from running. We just saw him painted very negatively in that athletic piece about how the Clippers went wrong last year. So like, my thing is, those stories, they're going to be written anyway. Like, this was my entire approach when I was in PR, was these stories, they're going to be written. You may as well try to talk to the tailors of them. You may as well, like, that suit's going to be cut. Whether or not it fits you is on you. Like, you can play a role in that. Now, it's not always going to go well. And to Kyrie's point, and to a lot of these athletes' point, there are a lot of people out there who are bad actors. That the Skip Baylesses of this world exist, and they're paid very, very well to exist, by the way. And like, I think that's the part that you and I agree on the most, is that we have to find some way to hold the Skip Baylesses accountable and like something short of lawsuits to what's the word that I'm thinking of where you're misrepresented in public. Oh man.
Slander?
There you go. Like slander.
Like in the legal sense, not in the slangy sense.
Something short of legal, slanderous lawsuits, like something short of that, but something to say to Skip Bayless, dude, you're being an ass right now, and if LeBron James comes out and says that Skip Bayless is being an ass all the time, well, then now he's just repeating Skip Bayless's name to all of his fan base. And a lot of people are going to go check out.
It amplifies. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to find a way that is not something that the athlete does, but like, frankly, I think it comes from the media ourselves. Like, I think when somebody is out there being an ass, his peers, their peers, their colleagues, I only say his because I was thinking of Skip Bayless, but their peers, their colleagues need to step up and say, dude, you're being an ass. And actually, I thought a really good example of this was with the LA Times, where the sports room, it seems like, kind of banded together and said, Arash Markazi is not handling himself in a very professional manner here. And I thought that was a really fascinating example of colleagues holding a writer or a member of the media accountable in ways that I don't think we see often enough.
How would somebody like Skip Bayless be held accountable everybody could wag their finger at him and say, you're playing this character, and kind of like the way he talks about LeBron, it's like, how much money has he made off of LeBron James? And now, mind you, Skip Bayless, the journey from Skip Bayless to your average beat writer, they're two different people. Like, most of the beat writers, and like,
that's
the vast majority of people are just trying to do their job. Right.
That's my other problem with Kyrie's approach, is that the people he's angry at, for the most part, now there are, like with the Celtics in particular, there were a lot of people really willing to leak the stuff that Danny Ainge was saying about Kyrie Irving on his way out. Now, like to a certain extent, when he, because there were some people taking issue with him pointing out beat reporters, and I would say there's a lot of people very willing in Boston to leak stuff about, especially predominantly African-American athletes. Like,
and that's the thing too.
That's been very pervasive in that culture.
Anthony, when the NBA was trying to get the bubble up and running, and Kyrie Irving voiced his concerns about how that was going to happen, the most powerful media member in NBA media called him a disruptor.
And how
do you think that makes Kyrie feel?
For that?
Kyrie is a very charitable guy, right? Like, I don't agree with a lot of what he says. I'm like, I facepalm at some of the stuff that he says, but that's somebody who gives a lot of his time and effort and money to really worthwhile causes, right? He did a podcast about where he was bringing up all of these social justice causes that he's into, and they took a little bit of it, right, to and it gets aggregated as some type of discord between him and I think it was KD, or I don't even remember what it was, but like the whole thing is about something else completely, and then this one thing gets taken. And but that's the thing, is that yes, there are painting it with too broad of a brush, and I can be guilty of this. Painting the media as one thing is not accurate. But when I love comparing LeBron with Kyrie and Kawhi, because we're talking about there is 3 different strategies toward approaching the media. LeBron does participate in this system, and he's very good at it, right? And he knows exactly what to say and what not to say in those types of environments.
And who to say it to, which is just
and who to say it to. Absolutely. That's the other thing. It's also no coincidence he started his own media company for when he's really got something to say and he doesn't want to get taken out of context. He doesn't put it out in that environment. It's in an environment that he controls and that he really can put out that final product. And that's the thing that I understand from a player's perspective, is that there are all of these things in this world that I believe in, that are causes that are, I'm more than an athlete, right? I think we're seeing a player revolution in a lot of ways, where they're asserting their power. And it's not a coincidence that even LeBron, who participates in this more than Kawhi and more than Kyrie, and Kawhi just is mostly like not participate at all. Kyrie can be openly hostile to it, right? Like that's what this statement was, basically, that I'm not going to participate in this. And I don't think it's terribly productive, but the underlying issue of being intentionally taken out of context, and there being there's no real repercussion for that. There's no accountability. In fact, people make a lot of money off that. People can wag their fingers at Skip Bayless and he's going to laugh and he's going to cash that check, right?
Yeah.
And that dynamic exists. It just does. And I understand why a player would be really frustrated with it, even though I think Kyrie's strategy for addressing that is bad.
Personally, I think this is something that the league can talk to its partners about. Like, you're talking about ways to hold it accountable. If the league said, hey, ESPN, that article Woj wrote about Kyrie and called him the disruptor, Woj can't leak like the next 3 stories. Woj can't be on the air for like a week. That was bullshit. They have to be able to come out and say that. And that's where, like, the NFL, by the way, is extremely strict on this stuff. Like, I remember when I wrote an article, this was when I was just starting out. I wrote an article for, at the time, Rant Sports, and I talked about why I was going to boycott the Super Bowl, and I was telling other people to do it too, because it was at that time with Ray Rice. And I thought the handling of the Ray Rice situation was offensive, where they knew what they had on the tape, and they chose to ignore it. And then TMZ got their hands on the tape, and then the NFL said, oh my God, this is awful. They tried to punish him a second time for the same thing, which you cannot do in America, and then told their fans, hey, if you want to turn in your Ray Rice jerseys, that's fine. You can have a Ray Lewis, Terrell Suggs, and there was a third player there. I think it was Joe Flacco. Ray Lewis allegedly committed murder at one point of his life, and Terrell Suggs allegedly beat his girlfriend, threw her on a this might be a different NFL player that was also there. But there was Terrell Suggs has his own violent history with domestic violence. And the NFL was just like, yeah, don't look at that guy. Here's these other players that we can go with. And I called it out. I wrote an article about why I wasn't going to watch that Super Bowl. And I got an email like 2 days after the article wrote. And I was just a tiny, I would be shocked if that thing got 1,000 or views, clicks or whatever. It was this tiny little thing, but you get an email from the NFL PR and they say, hey, that thing that you wrote, either take it down or this or that and the other. And it's like, on one hand, shitty because I thought what I wrote was fair. But on the other hand, it's how a league can hold its partners accountable for the stuff that the partners make money off of, for the ways that the partners make money off of the athletes.
So here's the danger, though, is that's also where it can become censorship, essentially, right?
It could.
The league controlling the message. Like, the media's job is not to say everything that the player wants them to say or the league wants them to say, right? And so that's the thing, is that, like, who is the determiner of bad faith, right?
Well, I think if it gets to a point where the league wants to step in. So, for example, since we're talking about Kyrie in this Disruptor article, right? If Kyrie wants to sit down and talk to the league about why he finds it unfair and in bad faith, then at that point the league can hear him out. They can make a decision. And they can go to ESPN and they can say, this is why we find it unfair and in bad faith. And yeah, you're right. It can kind of skirt the line of censorship, but it can also like, social media is doing this with this last election, right? Where if something is factually incorrect, Twitter and Facebook have gone about flagging it as such and giving reasons and citing why that is factually incorrect. And if the NBA goes to Woj, or if they go to ESPN and they go through that article and they can offer up examples of why that was, written in poor faith or unfair on a factual level to Kyrie Irving, then ESPN should have to pull the article and have to utter an apology to Kyrie Irving or to any other player who gets wronged in a similar fashion. Remember some of the stuff that Woj was writing about LeBron James when LeBron didn't allow him to break the story about him to going to Miami in the first place? That got flat out ugly. And that's where I would say that the league kind of has a responsibility to its players to step in and say, if you're being covered in a disingenuous manner, and maybe they nipped the Skip Bayless type of character in the bud earlier on, that guy doesn't exist in the way that he does now. And I would say, like, if I'm the league and my players all feel this way, or enough of them feel this way, I think it's something that the league should probably look into, because it's what PR is. Like, when I was doing PR and we had a client who felt like they were, it was like a restaurant was a client, and they felt like they got a poor review and they felt like the review was unfair. Guess who wasn't reviewing them next time? Guess who wasn't getting invited to the table next time that, that restaurateur has somebody to offer up something that is worth generating traffic over.
So that's the other side of this too, is that there is a power dynamic that already exists, and there are plenty of players and people who cover the NBA who will trade favorable coverage for someone in exchange for access to them.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that goes way back.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I would love for the dynamic to exist where the media, and again, this is a very broad brush, exists to speak truth to power and to hold people to account. But so long as it's for profit and you get rewarded for doing these things that operate outside of that scope, it's going to be problematic. And I understand why certain players just don't want to participate in it until that is addressed. So again, I don't think Kyrie is going to be effective in what he's doing, but I understand the sentiment.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're at. This conversation could frankly go on for another couple segments.
Yeah.
But we got to talk about Quinn Cook.
Everyone. Yes.
So let's take a quick second. We'll talk about that.
Hey everybody, it's Elaine Welteroth, and I'm hosting a new podcast called Built to Last by American Express, where we will dive deep into the stories, history, and continued legacy of small businesses that shape American culture. Our debut season will focus on Black-owned small businesses that need our support now more than ever. In each episode, we feature the story of a Black business trailblazer that has inspired a modern Black-owned business. First up is Pinky Cole of Atlanta's food truck turned restaurant, Saletti Vegan. We'll also chat with Hanifa Mwemba, the cutting-edge designer behind the Hanifa 3D digital fashion show. Plus, we'll check in with Issa Rae, our modern-day Renaissance woman. We hope that it encourages all of our listeners to support these businesses as well as the Black-owned businesses in your own communities. Tune in for these amazing stories and others on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Support for this podcast comes from AT&T. All right, so to stay connected, AT&T Business has the only wireless plan your teams need. With mobile hotspot data up to 100 gigabytes, they can easily use their phones to connect tablets and laptops to the internet from really virtually wherever work takes them, giving them the power to boost productivity even on the go. Upgrade to AT&T Business and get our best plan with nationwide 5G and 100 gigabytes in mobile hotspot data. Visit att.com/business elite. Terms and conditions apply.
So the Lakers bring back Quinn Cook, and he was somebody that I found myself actually kind of sad to see go, just because, like, I find it really cool when an athlete has a deeper or shows a deeper level of pride in playing for their team, not just like the Lakers. Obviously, this is who we're talking about now with Quinn Cook and being a Laker, but just in general, I find those relationships very cool between player and an organization or team. So when it was made known that he was going to be waived or was going to, might not return next year, I found myself a little sad. And then it's funny because I participated, in terms of an inner monologue of both of those things where it's like, oh, cool. I'm glad he's back. I'm happy. I was sad to see him go. I'm actually glad he's back. And then I started realizing, wait, that means the Lakers aren't going to be able to bring in another big man. If they had an eye on, a wing or something like that, who might still be out there, the Lakers aren't going to be able to go out and do that. And, I found myself in like smack dab in the middle of this debate. I don't feel one way or the other. How do you feel about it? Or how do you weigh the utilitarian version of roster, piecing together a roster versus keeping a closer eye towards chemistry?
Yeah. So my views are very much informed by what I and the rest of us really have access to is how good is the player, right? And so the Jared Dudley signing, for example, is similar from the best argument you make for it is for chemistry, and that matters.
Mm-hmm.
I've also never been in an NBA locker room, not in that way, right? Mm-hmm. Where I know what it's like to go through a long season and how much does it matter that those end of the bench guys, Jerry Tarkanian, the old UNLV great coach for UNLV, used to say, like, to be a great team, you need 8 guys who can play and 4 guys who cheer like hell on the end of the bench, right? Yeah. And so I would have liked to see us bring in a better player, but if you're going to go with a different strategy, right, with that chemistry strategy, that idea that having those guys at the end of the bench and, his relationship with Anthony Davis and just with the organization in general, he was the best guy available by far. I also think there was nobody else available on the free agent market where I was like, that guy's going to move the needle for us. That guy's going to make a big difference for us from that utilitarian standpoint. Mm-hmm. So being ignorant of locker room dynamics to a large degree of how much does this matter, I was of the perspective like, hey, we got our chemistry guy in Dudley. Let's make sure that every other spot is filled by somebody who can really, really hoop, the best player available type. And I don't think Cook fits that description. But if you're trying to have 2 guys at the end of the bench that feel that chemistry, like Dudley and Cook, there's just no better dudes than that. And then you stack the Laker fan angle on top of him and like him being really connected and it being important to him to be a Laker and all of that. It's not the direction I would go in with much more limited information, but if you're going to go that route, he's a good choice.
The Laker thing. So I remember early on in my career, it was something I would actively laugh at. right? The knows what it means to be a Laker was something
Sure.
that like I just found myself always rolling my eyes at. It was something I
I
always
mean, we
found
were
myself
getting our asses kicked when we were saying
right.
that, right? Like it doesn't hold quite the same weight when you're 19 and 63, right?
I care deeply about being a Laker, so deeply that I'm going to tank like to get this organization a better pick, and I'm going to do whatever I can to make it happen. At least that's the explanation I have for Byron Scott at the time. But the with this team and this collection of guys in particular, like Anthony Davis not drafted by the Lakers, right? He obviously feels a deeper connection with them, having won his first championship with this team, given what all the Lakers did to acquire him, given the amount of trust that he has with Rob Pelinka and Jeannie Buss and especially his teammates and his coach. You know, he has that connection to it. LeBron James, not drafted by the Lakers. You know, came to the Lakers a little later in his career. Now he is treating the Lakers differently than he has treated any other team that he's been with.
Yeah, I think LeBron's a little different. Like, I think the fact that he's a Cowboy fan and a Yankee fan, I think he's kind of attracted to empires, right? He's the king, right? He loves him a good kingdom. So I think he's a little different. I get your point, but I think LeBron's just wired a little bit differently in this respect.
Yeah. No, what I mean here though with talking about Cook is, and this might be like fresh out of a movie or something like that, but you know that scene in every sports movie where you know, the little guy stands up and yells at the stars, "You're a fucking Laker." You know, you represent this team. You look at the guys who wore the uniform before you.
Is that Quinn Cook to you?
Yeah, they like wake up. They wake up the stars or something like that. Trez is sick of coming off the bench. And you're like, we brought you over from the Clippers. You could still be dealing with Kawhi's perky ass right now. You know, like, that's how I see Quinn Cook. Like I could just see him because of this like level of stupid, but like the amount of love that he obviously has for this organization, the history of it, right? Remember how he was just devastated with Kobe's passing? You know, that's the kind of guy that because of, you know, the friendship that he has with Anthony Davis and the friendship that he has across this entire team, if that moment ever calls for somebody like stepping up, somebody you wouldn't expect to hear this from, like in Ted Lasso the other day. Or have you seen that show? Oh, you gotta see it. It's on Apple TV. It's like one of my favorite shows of the year. But they had this like kit manager who's basically like a ball boy, and they elevated him to coach because he was like, he's really good at the X's and O's of it and stuff. And they were going into this big match, and he's like, he wrote down like insults basically for everybody on the team about the way that they play. And it gets everybody fired up. And it's just like the stupid movie scene. It's a stupid TV show scene or whatever. But like, I think with guys who care on a more emotional level about the team that they play for, they're gonna be more like, so you get your typical chemistry guy, right? And Jared Dudley is more of your typical chemistry guy, though, you know, he's a San Diego kid, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have your typical chemistry guy, and then like I think if your chemistry guy is invested in the team that he's playing for beyond just his teammates and stuff like that, and has a deeper emotional connection to it, he's even more valuable potentially than like your typical end of the bench towel waiver kind of guy. And by the way, also like Quinn Cook, if needed in a spot, can step out there and space the floor. So it's not.
Yeah, he does. He's a specialist at the very least. He's difficult to have on the court and, you know, defensively as a ball handler, but he can knock down an open jumper or a pull-up jumper. Like he's at least got one that he's actually pretty good at NBA level skill.
Yeah, and I believe there was also the prior report that the NBA is considering expanding its rosters, at which point all of this becomes moot, right? And the Lakers
to some extent though, but we're hard capped.
Dwayne Dedman or something like that.
But we're hard capped. That's the thing, right? Is that if we weren't hard capped, I think that the expansion of the rosters would mean more. But
I wonder if they would address that either way, though. Like if the point of the expansion is for the literal health of all of the players involved, because there are plenty of hard cap teams, like because of the way that the hard cap rules are written. Like anybody who used the mid level this year, or anybody who benefited in a sign and trade, like they're all hard capped as well. And I kind of wonder if the league might say we can for this, if it's for a COVID spot in particular, maybe rethink some of those hard capping rules.
I feel like they would have done that before all of the
Probably.
player movement happened, if it was going to happen. I hope you're right, though.
Yeah, I think it's a smart thing to do, because if anybody who has paid attention to college football, actual football, college basketball, it's been a bleeping disaster.
This is going to be a weird year in the NBA. I don't know in which direction that's going to go, but I think it's going to be a very strange year.
At the very least, because like, all right, so if the reason somebody was upset at Cook, as you know, from a utilitarian standpoint, is concerned about not having enough big bodies, well, you can expand K-Cox to a availability, and there's your big body. There's your guy who can just step in and play like 10 minutes every fourth week of the month or something like that.
We also should have once the prorated salary gets below a certain point, which will happen in February, we should be able to add somebody on the buyout market at that point of the year. Not really until then, although something could happen at the trade deadline, who knows? But we're not completely out of moves to be made. Just remember last year, like, our roster wasn't complete at this point. We were playing Troy Daniels and Quinn Cook and Jared Dudley were all in the rotation on opening night. And so things won't change as much because we're hard capped, but this doesn't necessarily mean that this is the last version of the roster. And we just found out today that Cook's contract is non-guaranteed. So that plays into it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to have him back. I understand where some people are coming from, but I do feel like some of the frustration is that we've grown so accustomed to, like, I'm speaking from experience here. We've grown so accustomed to complaining about the Lakers that we finally have a really good offseason where we have very few complaints, that finally something doesn't kind of go our way. And we find ourselves like angrier at that than we would normally be because of the habits we've
Sure.
developed over the last 7 years.
Sure. I think I think the criticism's valid, right? I think the idea that we could have a better player in a year like this, it's totally valid. All I would say is that it's worth acknowledging that if you're going to go that chemistry route, of which we talked about how important the Lakers chemistry was all last season, and how going into the bubble, that was really going to be an advantage for them. And that proved to be true. And so bringing back two guys that were part of that, like Quinn Cook's going to host his Madden tournaments, and they're going to have some great nights that involve, like, Quinn Cook is one of the best dudes.
Just let him on the bus though, guys. Jesus.
Yeah, don't leave him behind this year, right? So yeah, I get the criticism from that utilitarian standpoint, but if you're going to go this route, Quinn Cook's a great dude to have in purple and gold.
Yeah, and like, look, we just talked about how this could be an even weirder year than normal, right? Like, last year was plenty weird with the bubble and all of that. We saw how last year's weirder than normal season, how chemistry played such an important factor in last season. Well, if this year we know going in is going to be really weird, I can actually really see why Pelinka would say, no, let's actually really focus on chemistry again, because of how weird this year is going to be.
For sure.
So, yeah, all of these things factor in. I understand where people are coming from on that. I really do. I thought about a lot of that stuff myself once it kind of set in on me that the Lakers are a hard capped, and this meant that, you couldn't do certain things. I my own brain went there as well. But the more I kind of thought about it, I really do think, like, having seen the amount that chemistry matters last year, I'm perfectly fine with valuing it and prioritizing it all over again this year.
Absolutely. And I think from the talent standpoint, that if we need another big, especially to get us kind of through the regular season, I'm totally fine with Devontae Kaycock getting some run. I think he's at that point where he can be that 12th, 13th guy that isn't a rotation player, but say Marc Gasol misses a couple weeks and now Kaycock is on the roster. Like, give him some run, right? I totally think he's capable of doing that. And I think that bringing Cook back is in some way an acknowledgement of that.
Yep. All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Lakers podcast. We are now, 3 shows away? 4 shows away? 3 shows away, right? From the first preseason game?
Yeah.
Something crazy
it's gonna
like
be Friday
that?
night. Yeah.
Holy crap. So
I'm excited. I'm excited to see the guys for the first time. Although who knows who's going to actually play, but it'll be fun.
Well, it like struck me over the week because Jen was like, hey, because her birthday is on Friday. And she was like, all right, so here's what I have, what I'd like to do over the course of the weekend. So Friday, her sister's coming over. Saturday, we're just kind of throwing a small little thing with our neighbors around here. Sunday, we're doing this small kind of dinner kind of thing. And I was like, well, on Friday, the Lakers are playing. And she's like, the what?
They played last week.
They're still on our DVR. What are you talking about?
Right.
But like after we kind of talked about it, she's like, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. She's excited for it too. So we're all in the same boat together. But Pete and I will be back tomorrow. We'll I keep promising the player preview thing. We're gonna do some kind of a preview heading into the season. Just a matter of the league not providing Pete and me stuff to argue over. That sometimes that comes first on the priority list. But for now, have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's.
Hey, I'm William Updike, and I'm the host of Locked On Clippers podcast, but I'm not alone.
Hey, it's me, Positive Chuck Mockler. I'm also the other host of Locked On Clippers.
We're your daily Clippers podcast, and you should subscribe every day for the latest on Kawhi and Paul George, the collapsing Clippers locker room, and their chase for their first championship or even Western Conference Finals berth.
Right now, we're focused on how Ty Lue's going to get the team back to where it should have probably been last year, as well as just kind of hoping the season's a little more consistent for the Clips on a personnel level. You can subscribe to Locked On Clippers wherever you get podcasts.
You've heard NBA All-Stars on Rejecting the Screen. You've heard Hall of Fame journalists on Rejecting the Screen. You've heard legendary stories for the first time on Rejecting the Screen.
He's Noah Kozlov, and I'm Adam Stanko. Join us by subscribing to Rejecting the Screen so that you always have all three sides of the story. Their side, our side, and the truth.